In 1989, the Bureau of Land Management, or BLM, described Susie Creek in northern Nevada as a dry, cracked scar in the middle of the desert. The stream had been reduced to only a thin trickle of water, exposing bare gravel and cracked mud, while the willow trees along the banks had dried up and died under the sun. Life here seemed to have come to an end. This was not surprising. Even though the name Nevada means snow-covered, it is the driest state in America, receiving less rainfall than even some parts of the Sahara Desert. Then, a few beavers appeared. They were not brought in by helicopter or by any massive government program. They had found their own way here after subtle changes that even the ranch owner did not notice. They began working with branches, mud, and survival instinct. But what they did helped restore streamside vegetation by as much as 373%. The surface area of water and the length of the stream that held water also increased many times over. How could a few small rodents create permanent wetlands in the driest desert state in America? This is the story of how ranches that once used dynamite to destroy beaver dams are now doing everything they can to bring them back. The problem at Susie Creek was not just drought. The American West is going through its most severe dry period in more than 1,200 years. But water does not disappear only because there is less rain. It also disappears because of the way we have managed the landscape over the past 150 years. This is the problem almost no one talks about. Before Europeans arrived in North America, the continent may have had around 60 to 400 million beavers. At the higher end, that is more than the current population of the United States. According to the USDA, their dam systems once created a massive network of millions of interconnected ponds and wetlands, covering more than 300,000 square miles, an area larger than the state of Texas. Then came the fur trade. From the early 1800s to the late 1900s, the beaver population dropped by more than 90%. In many areas, they were completely wiped out. By the early 20th century, only about 100,000 beavers remained, mostly living in hard-to-reach parts of Canada. When the beavers disappeared, their dams disappeared with them. When the dams disappeared, the water drained away too. An estimated 48 to 64 million acres of wetlands in the United States have been lost. The problem is that water in the American West depends almost entirely on deep snowpack in the high mountains during winter. When spring arrives, the snow melts and rushes downstream. If nothing slows it down, that floodwater races away, washing everything with it before disappearing. This is extremely important because climate change is making the situation worse. Snowpack is shrinking. Snow is melting earlier than expected. Summers are becoming longer and hotter. If you cannot store water on the land, you will not have water in August. And in the semi-arid West, August is exactly when ranches, farmers, fishermen, and wildlife need it the most. For most of the 20th century, to many ranchers in the American West, beavers were not ecosystem engineers. They were a problem. If you were someone living in Nevada, you would understand. You needed dry pasture so cattle could move around, clear irrigation ditches so water could flow, and streamside trees to provide shade for the herd. Then one morning, you would see water rising behind a dam made of branches and mud. The pasture would begin to flood. The irrigation channel would slow down. The willow trees would be chewed up and damaged. The ranching culture of that time pushed people to get rid of them as quickly as possible. What had happened in the past happened all over again to beavers. People trapped beavers, shot beavers, or destroyed their dams. John Griggs understood this better than anyone. In 1990, when he was still a young cowboy at Maggie Creek Ranch in Nevada, the first task he was given was not riding horses to herd cattle, but driving to Battle Mountain to bring back dynamite to blow up beaver dams. We saw pieces of wood flying everywhere, and we heard these huge explosions. But honestly, we did not accomplish much because we had no idea what we were doing, he later recalled. At that time, in their eyes, beavers were enemies that needed to be eliminated. But not everyone in Nevada looked at streams with that same violent mindset. In the late 1980s, Carol Evans, a fisheries biologist with the Bureau of Land Management, came to survey Maggie Creek. What she saw was the bigger picture of an ecosystem that was collapsing. Standing before that devastated landscape, she asked, "What if the ranch changed the way it grazed cattle? Instead of letting cattle stay along the creek all summer, trampling vegetation, eroding the stream banks, and polluting the water, what if we moved them somewhere else during the hottest months?" Carol Evans's solution was astonishingly simple. No concrete dams, no million-dollar project. She proposed just one thing to the ranch owners: Let the land rest. Cattle would be moved away from the creek banks in late spring and summer, so young plants would have time to breathe, combined with a system of seasonal rotational grazing. Although there was still a lot of doubt, John Griggs and his family agreed to give it a try. That one decision triggered a miraculous chain of natural recovery that no one could have expected. In the very first year, tough native grasses began to sprout, turning the damaged creek banks green again. By the second year, sedges, rushes, and other moisture-loving plants came rushing back, helping the soil become wetter and hold water for longer. By the mid-1990s, around the 8th year of the project, the real miracle happened. Young willow shrubs finally rooted deep into the ground and shot up more than 6 feet in just a few years. Willow trees are the lifeline for beavers. They are both their favorite food and one of the most important building materials for their dams. It turned out that people did not need helicopters or a major project to release beavers into the desert. By giving nature its space back, they had brought back the genius builders. And this time, the beavers found their own way home. They returned in 2003 in Susie Creek and the Maggie Creek watershed. In Susie Creek and the Maggie Creek watershed, they found their own way there because, after many years of letting the streamside area rest, the landscape finally had enough of what beavers needed: more stable water, less eroded stream banks, and most importantly, young willow shrubs that had grown large enough to provide food, shade, and building material for dams. They are true ecosystem engineers. Beavers are the second largest rodents in the world, after capybaras. An adult beaver can be nearly 3 feet long and weigh more than 44 pounds, but its impact is far greater than its body size. A beaver family usually lives in a colony of about 5 to 10 individuals. They work almost non-stop, cutting down trees, dragging branches, piling up mud, patching leaks, strengthening dams, and repairing their lodges before the current can damage their work. Everything beavers use comes from mud, branches, and slow-moving water. Beavers use their sharp front teeth, like chisels, to gnaw through trees. They eat the soft, nutrient-rich bark, then use the trunks, branches, and smaller twigs to build dams. They weave the materials together, pack in more mud, aquatic plants, and rocks, and turn a fast-moving stream into a chain of small ponds. That structure is not temporary. It needs no blueprint and no cement, but it can leave marks on the landscape far longer than many human-built structures. In Nevada, the dams at Maggie Creek were not massive like that. Many of them were only about 3 to 6 feet high and a few dozen yards long. But their impact was extremely clear. They began doing what this land had been missing for decades: slowing the water down. In the past, rainwater and melting snow rushed quickly through the valley, cut deep into the stream bed, and then disappeared from the landscape. But when beaver dams appeared, water was held back in small ponds, gently spread onto the floodplain, soaked into the ground, and helped recharge the groundwater. Sections of the creek that once dried up quickly in midsummer began holding water longer. The soil stayed moist longer. The grassland stayed green longer. Streamside trees had a better chance of surviving Nevada's harsh, hot months. Many sections of the stream here had once been incised, meaning the stream bed had cut deep into the ground like a giant drainage ditch. When that happens, water only runs through a narrow channel and can no longer spread across both sides of the valley. But beaver dams changed that process. Mud and sediment began building up behind the dams. The stream bed gradually rose. Water began spreading sideways, soaking across a wider area and turning the floodplain into a giant sponge capable of storing water underground. Then the number of dams began increasing very quickly. According to surveys at Maggie Creek, in 2006, there were about 107 beaver dams along roughly 20 miles of stream, averaging nearly 1 dam every 1,000 feet. Just 4 years later, that number rose to about 271 dams, an increase of more than 150%. As water was held on the land for longer, the entire streamside ecosystem began to expand. Some assessments recorded that the area and ecological function of the restored zone increased by about 371% compared with before. From above, the change was obvious. Areas that had once been brown and dry now stayed green longer into the summer. Ponds followed one another like a string of beads along the valley floor. Willows grew thicker along the stream banks. Wetlands expanded. Do you remember? In 2012, the American West sank deeper into one of the most severe droughts in more than 1,200 200 years. Scientists later confirmed that the period from 2000 to 2021 was the driest two-year stretch in southwestern North America since at least the year 800. Across Nevada, grasslands turned scorched brown. Many small streams disappeared completely by the end of summer. Quite a few ranchers had to truck in water just to keep their cattle alive. But at Maggie Creek Ranch and Susie Creek, something almost completely opposite was happening. In the sections with beaver dams, water still remained in deep pools. The current was still slow. The stream banks were still green with willows, wet grasses, and small wetlands sitting in the middle of the dry valley. This was not just a subjective feeling. The monitoring photos from Susie Creek became famous evidence in the world of ecological restoration. The photo from 1989 showed a stream that looked almost dead. Bare gravel, a thin and weak flow of water, stream banks with almost no vegetation, no shade, and no shelter for birds, fish, or insects. But when the same location was photographed again in 2015, the scene looked almost like a completely different place. If you put the two photos side by side, you can see just how dramatic the contrast was. That moment changed John Griggs. The man who once drove a truck loaded with dynamite to blow up beaver dams began to see them differently. Perhaps what changed him was not a scientific lecture, but the land itself right in front of his eyes. Even an old scientific objection began to weaken. For years, people worried that beaver ponds would be heated by the sun and harm cold water fish. But newer studies show that water in beaver ponds is not completely stagnant. It exchanges with the cooler groundwater below, creating thermal refuges for fish during the summer. In Bridge Creek, Oregon, a 2017 study showed that beaver dams and beaver dam analogs could soften extreme summer water temperatures. In Washington state, after beavers were successfully relocated, the water temperature downstream of the new dams dropped by an average of about 4.1 degrees Fahrenheit during low-flow season. That may sound small, but for cold water fish, just a few degrees can be the difference between survival and death from heat stress. And the story does not stop with drought. When beavers hold water on the land, streamside areas become moist, green strips that are harder to burn than the dry landscape around them. In September 2015, during one of the harshest drought periods Nevada had ever seen, the land around Susie Creek had turned scorched brown. But right in the middle of that landscape, one green ribbon was still alive. Water still sat in deep pools. Willows still grew thick along the banks. Water birds were still showing up. Then we quickly ran into a new problem. Beavers were coming back, but not fast enough. Many streams across the American West had been damaged too deeply. In places like that, beavers cannot return on their own because they have no food, no building materials for dams, and no steady enough water flow to start a colony. So humans copied beaver dams with BDAs, or beaver dam analogs, which are human-made structures designed to imitate beaver dams. The method sounds almost handmade. Drive wooden posts into the stream bed, weave willow branches between them, then pack in mud, sticks, small rocks, and plant debris. The goal is not to replace beavers forever. The goal is to slow the water down, raise soil moisture, help streamside plants grow back, and then create the conditions for real beavers to return and take over the rest of the work. The strength of BDAs is that they do not try to fight the stream. They simply help the stream remember how to heal itself. Traditional river restoration projects can cost tens of thousands or even millions of dollars per mile if they require excavation, channel reshaping, bank stabilization, or rebuilding the stream bed with heavy machinery. Meanwhile, many BDA structures can be built for only a few $100s each, depending on materials and labor. Joe Wheaton, a geomorphologist at Utah State University, calls this low-tech restoration. A very clear example is Birch Creek in Idaho. Rancher Jay Wild once watched the creek on his land flow only for a short time in spring before drying up. In 2015, he worked with scientists and restoration groups to build 19 beaver dam analogs, while also releasing 5 beavers nearby. The results came faster than many people expected. By the following summer, Birch Creek held water for about 2 months longer than before. The beavers did not just accept the artificial dams, they reinforced them with branches and mud, then improved the structures in ways that were more precise than humans could manage. Simply put, humans built the frame, and the beavers finished the design, From Nevada and Idaho to Oregon, Washington, Utah, Wyoming, and Colorado, this idea is spreading across the American West. Beavers that were once seen as a problem in irrigation ditches and residential areas are now being relocated to degraded streams. BDAs are being built in places where streams are too damaged to heal on their own. Carol Evans calls this a period of enlightenment about beavers. Of course, the story of beavers is not without risk. Even today, many scientists still warn that beaver dam analog projects are being rolled out very quickly, while long-term monitoring data in some places is still not extensive enough. Beavers themselves can also cause real problems at times. They can flood small roads, parks, pastures, irrigation ditches, or urban drainage channels. Even at Susie Creek, where the restoration story became famous, everything was not perfect from the beginning. As the number of beavers increased, there were times when they ate willow trees and flooded streamside areas faster than the vegetation could recover. Carol Evans once acknowledged that if the streamside plant community had been given another 5 to 10 years to regenerate before the beavers returned, the landscape might have adapted better. But precisely because there are downsides, the lesson from Susie Creek becomes even more valuable. Beavers cannot solve every climate problem in the American West. They cannot create rain on their own. They cannot save every stream that has been damaged too severely, and they cannot completely replace proper land management. But the system they create touches exactly what dry landscapes need most: slower moving water, soil that holds moisture longer, floodplains that start working again, and green corridors that can survive even in the middle of drought. That is why the story of Susie Creek is not just about beavers. It is about how humans once broke a stream, then learned how to step back and let nature heal itself. From a dry bed of gravel, water returned, willows grew back, waterbirds appeared, and a land that seemed to be slowly dying began to breathe again. What do you think? Are beavers a problem, or are they ecosystem engineers we once misunderstood? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel